Tonight on our Hawkeyes live show, we delve into the latest addition to the Iowa defensive team on our 81st edition. So, of course, you guys ultimately produce the show. So leave those comments and questions in the live chat. We will get to them. Corey Brada from the Hawkeye of the Storm for an 81st time. Corey, as always, we appreciate you doing this.
How are you, Mark? It's a rainy day here in Iowa. What's it like out in the great state of Ohio?
We've had a nice sunny week. Temperatures breaking 60 for the last few days. Today, more like high 40s, 50, and partly cloudy.
Yeah,
I was just out to grab, and this will not take us down a path that we go from time to time, but I just ran out between live streams and went out to get a Jimmy John's. So, I got a very recent look at the weather here.
Yeah, we can't afford to lose viewers now. We can afford to lose them later, but not now. So you're always about a day and a half behind our weather, so I'm sure you're going to have rain coming, would be my guess, in the next couple of days. But it's a monsoon here today, so much needed rain. It's we're still technically, I think, in a drought. Although with all the snow melting here of late and all this rain, hopefully we can kind of be on the plus side of everything. The past week has been interesting because for the first time in a while, we haven't had a lot of news. We had the Nick Jackson commitment that actually broke a day after we were live. Knew that was coming, but wanted to leave that to Nick. He announced it on Twitter last Wednesday. And then, of course, one thing that has been talked about a bit, and I haven't really talked about it on my show yet. I've had some people ask me about it. John Budmeyer got quite a boost in pay. He's making over $300,000 a year now, according to the Des Moines Register. I believe they did a FOIA request with the university. So interesting. I mean, we still have not heard anything about anybody retiring. That was kind of the thought is, well, maybe somebody like a Jay Neiman is walking away, which will open up a spot for John Budmeyer. It's hard to believe that John Budmeyer is going to be an analyst, or as his new title would indicate, a special assistant to the head coach. I believe that's his actual title. But he can't technically teach students, can't provide instruction on the field, and he's going to make over $300,000 doing that. That seems a little bit odd that you're going to pay a guy that much to just be on I wouldn't say off the field. He's been on the field. I mean, there obviously there's ways around. I shouldn't say ways around the rules by the NCAA and by the Big Ten Conference, but I mean, there have been media people even last spring that said, "Hey, John Budmeyer's on the field." So I don't know exactly. I mean, that would not be very smart if Iowa was having him actually working illegally with the students, but I'm guessing there's a way around that language. But he's getting paid quite a bit to do it. So it's kind of been a slow week or two. Things have kind of settled down. People are not. I mean, there's still people who are ripping the contract. I mean, I think that's still kind of the talk of the town right now. And once we get to spring, we'll get back into the mold of, okay, who's developing. We got some quite a few incoming guys. I mean, this would probably be the most active spring of newcomers, if you will, because most of the time you maybe have 2 to 4 early enrollees from your class, but now with the transfer portal, you got a bunch of guys who are here early because they're not true freshmen that can actually enroll early in January. So there's a lot of guys who are new this spring. So it'll be a cool spring practice. We'll get some news, I'm sure, in the coming couple of weeks, I would guess, on spring practice schedules. I don't remember exactly when the university releases that information, but March Madness will be here, and then spring football.
Yeah, so while we know the date of the spring game, or there's not a spring game per se for Iowa, they're going to have a final practice. Has that date been announced?
It's a great question. I have no idea.
Okay. But typically it's, in the 4 to 6 week range before that you can project when spring practice will start before that announcement's made. But, most of the Big Ten teams are in that mid to late April window of when they play their spring games. So usually it's right around the first week of March that we see our first spring practices. So it's almost here.
I don't believe that's been announced. I haven't gotten any. I mean, I'm on the press release list, I've not gotten anything about spring practice yet from the university. So unless that's just maybe that's an exclusive VIP list that I'm not a part of, Mark. I'd have to go back to see when they announced that last year. I could actually do that while we're talking here.
Well,
Curious.
I certainly think that you're going to be notified on that.
Yeah,
I'm doing my best to get on the email list. The SID at Iowa. Can't think of his name right now, but
Steve Rowe. You still
yes.
haven't done that yet?
Pardon me?
You still haven't gotten on the list yet?
I just sent an email to all the athletic directors or not the athletic directors, the SIDs for the various teams that I wanted to have that information from. And actually, he was nice enough to send me to the Big Ten mailing list and say, you can fill this out to get on the mailing list for whatever Big Ten teams you would like to be on and whatever for whatever sports you would like to be on.
Okay, so last year, the first day of spring practice was March 23rd. So that should give people some context. Maybe that's out there. Let's see. Yeah, March 23rd was the first day of spring practice last year.
Okay, so it's going to be a while. Okay,
So
about a
it's
month.
somewhere, yeah, it's somewhere in there. And then, of course, the final spring game was on, let me find that, Saturday, April 23rd. So, again, I haven't gotten any specific information that I'm aware of, but I'm sure it's going to be in that range again.
Your one, I may not call it a concern, but an area obviously where this football team has been hurt since last season, hit with departures, is the linebacking core. And I know that you certainly covered the Nick Jackson signing extensively. And the numbers are just, this guy's a tackling machine who's played a ton of football. And again, I know that you've covered all this, but we're looking at 40 games played in his career at Virginia and over 100 tackles 3 consecutive years. There's not a whole lot of guys that rack up those kind of numbers.
They got a lot of production to replace, Mark, as you brought out at the beginning. I mean, to start with Jack Campbell, who's going to be, I think, a high draft pick. I don't know if he's a top 2 round draft pick. I think teams would be be foolish to not draft him, at least in the second round, given his size and his toughness and his numbers. So they need production back. Seth Benson also hired an agent, so he's gone. Justin Jacobs, sounds like NIL was a somewhat of a pull there to go to Oregon. So, I mean, that's a lot of production you got to replace. And so they needed Nick Jackson. I think they like Jay Higgins. I think you're going to have Jackson and Jay Higgins as 2 of your starting linebackers. And then who's the third? I mean, is it going to be Kyler Fisher? Is it going to be, I think Logan Klemp is actually gone. So is it like a Jaden Harrell, guy who is kind of a good young prospect at a high school, but it's been kind of quiet on the scene behind closed doors? Justice Sullivan is a guy from actually near me. I grew up in the Ballard area and then transferred up to play high school ball up in Minnesota. They got bodies there, but they needed Nick Jackson. And as you said, he's a multi-year all ACC kid. Virginia's not a good football program right now, as you know. So it makes sense that he would want to go somewhere that has a better reputation and certainly maybe a better track record for producing NFL guys. I had a couple people ask me, well, if he's so good, why isn't he going to the league? That's a fair question. I think a couple things are key here. And I was told that NIL is not a big pull for Nick Jackson to come to Iowa. Now, might he be getting some extra NIL incentive? Sure. That's probably going to be there. But, I mean, he's 6'1", maybe a little bit undersized to be a real high NFL draft pick at his position. From what I've read, again, you're watching tape and it's hard to decipher how good he is in coverage. Perhaps that's a concern for some NFL scouts, his ability to cover in the open field. But he's obviously got really good athleticism. He's got a knack for finding the ball. And he's got a good burst. I mean, from at least what I'm seeing on tape, what I saw on tape, and I haven't watched a lot of Virginia football, Mark, but what I could find of Nick Jackson, he's got a good burst to the ball. And yeah, I mean, he's going to fit in nicely. And I wouldn't say guaranteed a starting role because you got a lot of guys competing, But boy, it's would be hard to turn that down, that type of production. And let's remember, he was wanted by Auburn, LSU, Oklahoma. Most of the bigger name schools down south wanted this kid, and big win for Phil Parker, testament to him and Seth Wallace.
To me, that's the best indication of his worth and his value, and how quality of a level that production is when you throw out those three names. In addition to Iowa, let's not discount Iowa's interest in him being a valid reason why there should be confidence of his ability, because the Hawkeyes produce a top level defense just about every year. So,
Mark,
and
can we
certainly the other
revisit the topic we had at the beginning of the season? The very beginning of the season, you and I had a debate on which team had the best linebacking core. In hindsight, do you retract what you said about Alabama, or would you still give Alabama the nod over Iowa? I think it's clear those were the top two linebacking cores in the country this past year, based on all the numbers that I've seen.
Sure, I can't make a definitive call on that. Yeah, I got to be prepared for that debate, if there's going to be a debate.
Well,
and then I would bring others into the conversation, I'm sure, if I really thought about it.
What happened to this Big Ten round? Didn't you say we're going to have a Big Ten roundtable at some point?
Big Ten roundtable, yes. We'll get that together.
And
It'll be a whole lot of fun.
And you're sending me a whole case of Oreo cookies, correct?
No, you're mixing up. You're mixing up initiatives here at the Voice of College Football.
I am.
Yes,
okay.
Those are not related.
That's not the Great Oreo Challenge.
No.
Oh, I thought that the Great Oreo Challenge was see how fast you could send Corey a case of Oreo cookies. Anyway,
that is not the challenge, but yes, would love to have. I would look forward to that, having you and a lot of other great Big Ten minds to get together and slice up the conference. That'll be fun.
So excited about Nick Jackson. Provides good depth for a position that needs some help, but a position that has a great reputation. And the reason I brought up the Alabama versus Iowa discussion is because I think there is no question that those two linebacking cores, from everything I've seen, I know Pro Football Focus does a lot of grading at the end of the season. I know they've got Iowa and Alabama as their two top linebacking cores from 2023. Again, it's hard for me to say this because I'm not watching all these different schools on a week in and week out basis, but I'm curious, Mark, how do you perceive, which schools do you perceive to be linebacker U? Like, we always talk about tight end U, and I've heard, the debate on cornerback U. Would Iowa be in the discussion for linebacker U? You think about the numbers of guys that they've produced in just recent years: Josie Jewell, Ben Neiman, Anthony Hitchens, Christian Kirksey. Now it's going to be Jack Campbell, maybe Seth Benson if he works his way into a camp. They've had a number of guys who have ended up being really good NFL players in recent time. Do they even get into that conversation?
So you want to stick to a recent conversation. You don't want to go historical on this.
I'm talking last 10 to 15 years.
Yeah. I would think off the top of my head, while Penn State is known as linebacker U, that's a previous generation, designation. Really, in the Big Ten, I would say that actually Iowa and Wisconsin have produced the best linebacking cores and the best linebacker individuals in the last 10 or 15 years. Ohio State would be in that running prior to about 5 years ago. They've really had a run of just mediocre linebacking cores up until this past season. And going national, Alabama's going to be in that discussion at any position unit and also at linebacker. They are going to be in that conversation for sure. And Georgia's going to be in that conversation. Yeah, in the last 10 years, they're going to be there as well. Those are the 4 or 5 schools.
Okay, where does Oregon? Are they anywhere in the conversation?
No.
Okay, it is interesting.
Not that high.
Even in hindsight, it is interesting. I'll be curious to see how. I don't wish nothing bad on Justin Jacobs, but it's interesting. Like, how much money did he get to go out there? That's a valid conversation and valid topic because Mark, he's going somewhere. He's coming off an injured year, and I mean, I think he would have been drafted had he left even after the injury. But you just wonder, like, if he goes out there and is just mediocre, could he ruin his draft stock? I mean, you just wonder that because he's not at a school that has a reputation of producing great linebackers. I don't think of Oregon producing great defensive players in general at the next level necessarily. So it is interesting. I mean, he's going to get a bag, but how big of a bag? And, you have other kids that have decided to go with the long route, right? The long game approach. It looked like Caden Proctor was going to do that. All right. Now, as I've said over and over again, his camp has been clear, or I should say they have claimed adamantly and vehemently that his decision to go to Alabama was not about money. But you hear a lot of other people that say, yeah, it was about money. So who knows for sure? But you look at guys like Jack Campbell. Jack could have left in his senior year and probably went somewhere else and made more money. He decided to stick around, and he's going to be making plenty of money in the NFL. That's the thing now with NIL, Mark, and that's maybe we're seeing it to an extent, but you wonder if things aren't reined in within the next couple of seasons. You do wonder. We talk about the rich getting richer. To what extent will the transfer portal and the NIL market make that just exaggerate that factor? Because it's happening now, right? Kids are leaving so they can make more money other places like Justin Jacobs, but I don't know that we're seeing it to the extent that we could in a year or two. And you think about the schools that maybe have 1, 2, or 3 stars on their team. Yeah, I mean, like in a year or two, those guys leave. I mean, we're going to have potential for the Rutgers of the world and even the Kansases of the world to all of a sudden be completely bare because of the transfer portal and because of the free market that is NIL right now. I don't know. It's happening, Mark. You probably have a better feel of it than I do.
Well, I've talked to people that are heavy in NIL, like legitimately in the game and doing it the right way and involved at the university level or, with those collectives. And, we hear these outrageous sums of money figures, and it's been told to me by enough credible people that I trust that those figures are not that they aren't, well, first of all, they're somewhat exaggerated in most cases, and I know as soon as I say that, people are going to think of the Florida situation with Jaden Rashada. Maybe that one wasn't, but by and large, that those numbers are inflated a little bit. Plus, we hear various examples, 4 or 5 of those, and then we just assume, okay, this is like this kind of money is being thrown all over the place. Where most of the NIL deals are in the $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 range. Now, I hope that a player with a high prospectus to go to the NFL is not bypassing a good situation where he currently is to go to another situation because he can make $50,000 in NIL instead of $25,000 in NIL. But if you're making money for the first time, most of these players have never earned $1 in their lives. $50,000 compared to $25,000 is a significant difference, but it's not significant if they're playing the long game. If they're thinking about their future and thinking about development and all those things being much more crucial to their long-term success than just picking up a couple extra $1,000 from an NIL deal. Now, with Caden Proctor, I would have to say he's also playing the long game going to Alabama. I don't think there's much of a downside to that.
I'll say this too. I think perhaps, and maybe you can tell me I'm wrong on this, but perhaps this is more of a concern moving forward with basketball. Because when one guy leaves, a star leaves on a basketball team, it's more significant just because of pure lack of numbers. It's, his contributions are more essential than, one star on a football team. But at the same time, there are less guys getting paid in the NBA, right? Than in the NFL. So regardless, I think there's a lot more guys that feel they have a chance to play at the NFL level that are playing college football, whereas there's guys in college basketball that know they're never playing in the NBA. Like Jordan Bohannon, if he was a big part of the push for NIL a couple of years ago, and he played 6 years of college basketball, left this past year. But if he was around now, like if he had a seventh year somehow, and I don't think he would have ever done this because I think he's too loyal. He was too loyal to Iowa. He grew up here, but he's a perfect example of somebody that could have said, you know what, I'm not going to ever play in the NBA. And he's not going to play in the NBA. But I mean, with someone with his acumen to shooting threes and making big shots in big moments at this level, he's kind of, I wouldn't say a showstopper, but he had moments in his career where he was sensational. So you wonder, like in North Carolina, there were rumors 2 years before Jordan, the year before Jordan left, that North Carolina was interested in him. I don't know if there was any substance to that, but there were rumors out there. And you just wonder, had that been 2 years down the road with NIL collectives and whatnot in place, man, that would be hard to turn down if you're a Jordan Bohannon. Again, a guy who is likely never going to play in the pros. Now he's going to play professionally somewhere. But if North Carolina says, hey, we'll give you $400,000 to be here for a year. He's been at Iowa for 4 years already. He wants to go to North Carolina for $100,000. Boy, that'd be hard to turn down, Mark. I'm just saying, in my position, I'm just thinking if I was, you think about this for a second. You're in this young man's position, and he's going to be making, I don't know what they make over in Turkey and France and whatnot as a pro basketball player. He'd make a nice income. But boy, quick $100,000 to play college basketball at a blue blood. I just think you might see it more at that level because there's less spots in the NBA. I could be wrong on that. But it will be interesting to see, and I will be intrigued to see what Justin Jacobs does at Oregon. I wish him the best because you just hate to see him go. I mean, here he's leaving a place that was oozing with opportunity, right? With Jack Campbell gone and Seth Benson gone, he would have been the star of that linebacking core, and you could argue the star of the defense. Now Cooper DeJean maybe would take that. I mean, he's kind of the next guy in from that perspective. But boy, Cooper DeJean, Justin Jacobs, Xavier Wampa would have formed a nice nucleus back there behind a pretty solid defensive front. So, just interesting now that Iowa's got Nick Jackson. They needed Nick Jackson, but I hope that Justin Jacobs doesn't look back and regret his decision. There may be other things going on behind the scenes that we have no idea. I can say on Twitter, was it a few weeks after Terry Roberts entered the portal, and of course now he's at Miami now. He responded to somebody on Twitter about how he wasn't being treated correctly or treated right, which gives you kind of shades of 2020. Now, I don't know what that means, and he'll probably never expound on what he means. And perhaps he's just upset with how he was treated after entering the portal. Who knows? But, not everybody loves their college experience. And I know some people think Iowa was just the greatest place on earth. There were obviously a lot of people back in 2020 that didn't feel that way. And although I think a lot of those issues that maybe were oversight issues on the part of Kirk Ferentz were probably corrected, sounds like they were corrected. Doesn't mean it's perfect. So I think probably it's likely that Justin Jacobs leaving was NIL related. Heck, maybe Terry Roberts leaving was partly NIL related. I mean, here's a guy who was probably going to start, Mark. We don't know that because Cooper DeJean had been playing corner, but you lose Riley Moss. Jamar Harris is coming off a pretty serious injury that put him out for the entire year. It was kind of odd. You and I both came on this show when he left, when Terry Roberts entered the portal, and said, this is kind of an odd one. But he's headed to Miami, and Miami's got plenty of NIL funding. So be interested to know what he's getting down there.
Still trying to process the math of it being more difficult and less likely for a college basketball player to move on to the NBA, or if it's exactly the same. If you look at the percentages, because if you've got 130 football teams at the Division I, the FBS level that have 100 players, there's 13,000 players, and they're filling up 32 NFL rosters that are roughly 53 players. Isn't that the same ratio as And I know with college basketball, there are far more teams in Division One. Isn't there like 350 teams or something like that?
Absolutely. And I think it's my thought process on that is what percentage of players from in the NFL came from Power 5 schools, as opposed to if you look at the NBA, there's probably, I would guess, there's a greater percentage of players that just came from Division 1 that didn't have to be power. You know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
The
Yep.
pool is much bigger. I mean, that's why we see teams making deep runs in the tournament. Talent is more spread out in college basketball.
Yes, it is. You will certainly keep me abreast of all that over the next 6 weeks or so.
You know, watch March. I'm encouraging you to be a part of March Madness this year, Mark. Please.
It will have to kind of fall in my lap. I can't make a determination on that right this second.
I'll tell you what you need to do, regardless of if you watch the NCAA tournament. You always do something related to March Madness, right? And you do something with like you do like a bracketology or something with the Voice of College Football?
Well, we'll relate football to basketball.
Yeah.
We'll relate,
what do you call that? You have a name for it? What do you do? What did you do last year? Do you remember?
I have no idea.
You need to call it
I don't remember.
You need to call it Mark Madness. Very simple.
Corey's really good with these coming up with names from the Hawkeye of the Storm and others. That's very nice. Very nice. I like that. Yeah, I can't commit myself to that. For a second there, you were talking to me like I had no idea what this was. Like you were trying to sell me on something that I don't.
What, March Madness?
Yes, that I don't have any perspective on what it is.
Have you covered? Let me ask you. Have you covered? I'm guessing you have covered an NCAA tournament in person.
Absolutely, I have several.
Yeah,
yeah, in person. I've been at the Final Four. I've I've covered the Final Four. I've covered a few different, Sweet 16s. I've been to Indianapolis, to the Hoosier Dome at the time, and Rupp Arena, and the Superdome in New Orleans, and Atlanta, and Memphis, and all sorts of different stops. Oklahoma City, and for NCAA basketball. Absolutely.
Well, I'll be interested to see once we hit March. It all depends on where Iowa ends up and how far Iowa advances. But people were upset about the staff situation here the last couple of weeks. I'll be interested to see once Iowa's out of the tournament, because everybody loses at some point, right? Except one team. So once Iowa loses in the tournament, how people will respond. If Iowa takes it, honestly, it's better for Kirk Ferentz in that football program if Iowa gets to the Sweet 16 for the first time since 1999, even though it may put the spotlight on Iowa. Okay, what now? You got to take the next step because Iowa basketball did. At the same time, people will be upset, and boy, there won't be much between middle of March and end of August. We got Iowa baseball and Iowa softball and different things, but it will be intriguing once we hit March and April, the mindsets of Iowa football fans. I think a lot of fans will actually kind of move on from the Brian situation. I mean, there's so many people now that I hear from throughout the week that have basically just said, it is what it is. This is it. This is nepotism. It's whatever. That's your opinion. You have every right to that opinion. I understand where you're coming from, but at some point, you're not going to not root for your team. And Iowa does have some exciting young guys. I think Nick Jackson, we were talking about him at the outset of the show, Mark. I think he might be the best player Iowa has gotten out of the portal. And I had somebody, when I said that on YouTube the other day, somebody, well, how could you say that when you got Cade McNamara coming in? Mark, you want to comment on that? Better player, better college football player, Nick Jackson or Cade McNamara?
Well, they're being blinded by the position and
Correct.
the notoriety of the position and where he played. Yes, most of us are more familiar with Cade McNamara because of where he played, in what conference he played, and with what position, and also the success of the team. But Cade McNamara was a top 5 to 6 quarterback in the Big Ten, without remembering exactly who else would have been in the running at the time 2 years ago, versus Nick Jackson, who's an all ACC player at his position.
And so was Cade an all ACC guy in 2020, or all ACC? Was he an all Big Ten guy in 2021?
No.
He wasn't even third team all Big Ten? It was a weak year. It was wait a minute. It was a
Well,
week.
right out of the gate, C.J. Stroud, Aiden O'Connell lit it up in 21.
Okay, so who was third team?
Spencer Petras? No. Probably I would guess off the top of my head that Peyton Thorne probably had a better year that season.
You think it was really Peyton Thorne? Wait, are you sure? You sure on this?
No, I'm not sure. If I was sure, I would have just spit out the name. I'm scanning through the Big Ten. Sean Clifford, Peyton Thorne, 2021. Who else? Certainly not Graham Mertz. Talia Tagovailoa had a nice season in 21.
Cade McNamara was third team All Big Ten.
Okay, third team All Big Ten
in 2021.
I don't necessarily trust those designations, those all-star team designations.
Coaches and media.
Okay.
So there you go.
I wonder if he would have produced those numbers for a 7-5 team if he would have been third team All Big Ten.
Say that again.
If he would have produced the same numbers for a 7-5 team.
Well, I don't think this is not. I mean, those awards should not purely be based on statistics, right? On individual statistics.
Absolutely not.
I mean, he did lead that team to a conference championship. Is that are we in agreement on that?
Yes, those are the facts. Yes.
Okay.
I'm not trying to downgrade Cade McNamara. I just don't know that he was the third best quarterback in the Big Ten.
Okay, so are you familiar? So I'm just curious. I'm looking at his.
He was certainly not one of the two best because those other guys were definitely the two best quarterbacks in the Big Ten.
How many yards per game do you think he averaged in 2021? Let's just do a little trivia here. If you had to guess,
all right,
passing yards per game.
He averaged 189 yards per game.
Very good guess. 184.
I'm usually pretty good at this.
We'll 184. See. How many rushing yards did he average per game?
Oh.
Remember, you know how college football stats are tracked.
Yeah, they're based on sacks included. I would say like 13.
2.
Okay.
2. Which, by the way, that I know that sounds horrendous, but if you looked at Spencer Petras' rushing numbers, it would probably be like negative 20, I would guess. I could be wrong on that. But my guess is that Cade, well, not my guess. I can tell you he made up for
those statistics need to be revised.
I agree. That's a stupid way to track rushing yards. Very stupid. So let me find here.
He threw 15 touchdowns with 6 interceptions, I believe, or his touchdown to interception ratio.
Say that again. What were the numbers?
15 and 6.
15 and 6. You're correct. 15 and 6. 142 passer rating in 2021. What was his completion percentage, Mark? And how many yards did he have in the season?
I would say, well, he had 184 times
14.
14.
Right? 14.
I'm going to say that he completed 64% of his passes.
Good call. 64.2. So how many yards is that?
I almost said 64.3. Is in my head.
How many yards? Can you do
14 times 184.
2,576.
Okay.
It's an average of 8 yards per attempt.
Okay. So I have a pretty good handle on what Cade McNamara.
Remember, the Big Ten, I would say from 2020 to 2021, you could argue the Big Ten was down at the quarterback position.
Yes, and still is.
And still is, correct. Now, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, I do think the Big Ten will be better this year at that position, even though you lose.
Yeah.
You're going to lose
Aiden O'Connell.
But
C.J. Stroud.
You're going to lose Stroud, but you have you got good quarterback depth at Wisconsin. You got good quarterback depth at Nebraska. Some of that is unproven at this point, but I think both of those positions have the opportunity. Both those spots have an opportunity to have a big boost forward. You've got Callie McManus at Minnesota, who is young and budding, and if,
Yeah.
we'll see if he takes that next step.
Actually, the Wisconsin and Nebraska guys aren't unproven.
Well, they're unproven. Well, they are unproven. What are you talking about? Mordecai is not proven at this level.
Well, that's what I'm saying. He's played a lot of football and thrown 35 touchdown passes in a season in the American Conference.
At SMU.
Yeah. And between Casey Thompson and Jeff Sims at Nebraska, they're both experienced quarterbacks. Going
up against that vaunted Houston defense.
I understand that.
And Jeff Sims, I'll be anxious to see I'm very intrigued by Nebraska's quarterback situation with Jeff Sims and Casey Thompson.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Thompson will win that battle. And if he does Jeff Sims end up back in the portal after spring? I mean, that's going to be an intriguing one. So I will be interested to see how Nebraska, Wisconsin, because Wisconsin also has Evers.
Sure.
So he's another interesting one to follow. So Wisconsin, Nebraska, I think we'll get an upgrade. Minnesota's quarterback will be better. Iowa's quarterback will be better. Mark?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
All
yes,
right.
he will. I can't recall who that is, but yeah, Evers is unproven. I will agree with you on that one.
Tagovailoa is back, correct?
Yes.
Tagovailoa is probably going to be, you could argue, the face of the conference at quarterback. Is that fair to say? With Stroud and O'Connell gone?
At least in the preseason.
Okay.
Meaning that whoever plays quarterback for Ohio State is going to have better numbers than Taulia Tagovailoa.
Obviously, we're skipping over the
McCarthy.
JJ McCarthy.
I would say he's the face of the quarterback position in the conference.
He was okay. I mean, he was okay this past season. He went great. Can we agree on that? He was not great. He was okay.
Yeah, he was better than Cade McNamara.
Marginally better.
He's a better quarterback, or he would not have won the job.
Well, he's also he was a 5-star out of high school, and he's flashier, and
he won the job.
He won the job. He was named the starting quarterback.
Yeah, he won the job. He's better than Cade McNamara.
Sure. Well, obviously, a lot of people agree with you. So does Jim Harbaugh. But I'm just saying, I watched both guys, and I never thought that McCarthy was substantially. I thought he was maybe marginally better. I thought maybe he had a bit more upside. He's a bit more mobile.
Oh, he's got a lot more upside.
Okay, well, he got to realize it. Got to realize it, Mark.
He has realized it. He's better than Cade McNamara now, even if it's marginally so. You're still agreeing with me. He's better than Cade McNamara, and he has an opportunity and the talent to be substantially better.
Okay,
that's not a knock on Cade McNamara.
Yeah, but he's got a lot of guys have. Jamarcus Russell had the talent to be a great NFL quarterback. Never was. So got to prove it, and I just don't think McCarthy has proven it yet. I'm not saying it was the wrong decision, but on the part of Harbaugh, you're aiming for the future. So I think when you say, well, he won the starting job, I wasn't there behind closed doors, but both players played in meaningless games. Did one of those two players look better in those meaningless games?
They played 3 games, and McCarthy played better.
Oh, marginally. Marginally, if you want to argue that. We can go back and look at stats.
You may want to look at the numbers for those 3 games.
Let's look at the numbers, Mark.
He was better.
Okay.
And everyone knew he was better even before playing those 3 games.
Okay. So there's what it comes down to.
And
so there's a narrative, there's a notion that's in place prior to actually seeing, because the guy's flashier and he's a 5-star.
By the media and fans. I don't know if Jim Harbaugh looked at it that way, but Jim Harbaugh gave Cade McNamara the respect of a Big Ten championship quarterback to give him the competition into the season.
Yeah. Here's what I'll say as it relates to a competition. If you have 2 guys who are almost even, I'm not saying McCarthy's not better, but I'm saying if you have guys who are
it was a competition.
Yeah, it wasn't like a blowaway, right?
Nope.
So you look at those 2 guys, a good coaching staff that understands how to evaluate offensive talent should side with a guy who's younger. If there's 2 guys who are close, and that's how Hayden Fry operated, because I talked to Don Patterson about this a number of times. You got 2 guys who are close in practice, go with the younger guy because the younger guy has more upside. So I'm just saying, I don't doubt that JJ McCarthy has more upside, but I'm just saying I have not seen, and I'm not watching every Michigan game, but I didn't notice much of a difference between what we saw with JJ McCarthy at quarterback and what we saw with Cade McNamara at quarterback, other than the fact that McCarthy does have an element with his legs that McNamara doesn't have. And obviously he's thought to have a greater upside and better arm talent in general. So we'll see. I mean, if McCarthy is all that he was hyped up to be, he ought to be the face of the Big Ten this year. It should not be little man Talia Tagovailoa at Maryland. I mean, he shouldn't be. I mean, no offense to Tagovailoa, but it should not be.
Yeah, and that's why I said it's JJ McCarthy.
Yeah, well, we'll find out.
And it's not the only thing I would correct out of everything that you said, in my opinion, would be that you said, McCarthy is thought to have the better arm. No, he has the better arm. We've all seen them throw enough. He's got the better arm.
I saw him.
It's not comparable.
I saw him kind of take a dump against Illinois towards the end of this past season, and wasn't able really to do anything in that game. So, and that's against a West defense, all the laughing stock division of the conference, Mark.
Well, it was one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in the country statistically.
Some people say that the defenses were rated better in this division, though, because of who they were playing week in and week out. Didn't look like
I think it's a little bit of both. Yes.
Yeah.
Those defenses are really good. Iowa being at the very top of the heap. And then that Minnesota, Illinois, Wisconsin group being very good. But yeah, they play each other and those marginal offenses and horrendous.
All joking aside, Mark.
Yes.
It will be very, very special if Iowa can win the Big Ten West this year, which I think they're the favorites. Despite doubling down on Bri, I think they're the favorites to win this division. And if they do that, Mark, there's a good chance they play Michigan.
Sure.
Now, there's no guarantee that Michigan beats Ohio State. Who's the early favorite in your eyes in the East?
Michigan.
And is that simply because of the change at the quarterback helm? Primarily.
Michigan has a more solid defense. I trust Michigan's defense more. I think Ohio State still has better roster talent. I argued that with Steve Dace a week or 2 ago. We had his total team talent rankings where he says Michigan's better. But Ohio State still has more talented roster. Anyway, turnover at quarterback, and Ohio State still has these questions on defense against really good opponents. And they got to go to Ann Arbor. If they're both undefeated, like most people would expect at the end of the year, Ohio State goes to Michigan.
By the way, I just want to say you did a terrific job, you and Steve Dace, on The One this past week, talking about Iowa's dysfunction. But I want to make something very clear. And I've had conversations with Steve Dace about this on the air. We've talked about this subject. I mean, you talking with him was not the first time you brought this subject up with Steve, but now since the further dysfunction here. He one thing about what Steve continued to say during that podcast, Mark, was about how he actually kind of admires what Kirk's doing and he keeps looking up to it, even though. But then the key there, I want to say this: the key with what Steve Dace said at the end of that discussion was, if I was an Iowa fan, I probably wouldn't feel this way. See, that's the key. See, he lives in Iowa. He's a Michigan fan, and he can sit and wallow in the grief that is the Iowa offense, Mark. So I love Steve Dace's take on football. I think he's a great commentator, great at what he does, breaking down Michigan and Big Ten football. There is some bias there when he says it's endearing, and what was the term he used? He looks up to it. He respects it. He respects Kirk Ferentz, just basically saying, who cares what the fans say? I'm going to do what I want.
Yeah, kind of screw you. I'll do what I want.
Yeah. See, he laughs at that as a Michigan fan. Let's just remember, he laughs at that as a Michigan fan.
I think he also, though, does truly admire maybe to use one of his terms, kahunas, the intestinal fortitude to basically say, I don't care what the backlash is or the criticism. I'm going to run this program the way I want to.
Well, I would respect that if there was, okay, I would respect that if there was a legitimate power that actually was known to be willing to do something about it. Like if he just said, I'm going to do this no matter what, and you're going to have to step up to the plate and make a change. I don't think that's the situation, though. I believe that the situation with Kirk Ferentz and this athletic department is he just rules the roost. Kirk Ferentz is just calling the shots. It's not Gary Barta. So I can kind of see where can you kind of see where I'm coming from? Like there's no
I've never disagreed with you at all concerning this topic.
There's no acceptance to, like, Kirk Ferentz is not sitting here thinking, I'm gonna would you use the term kahunas?
Yes.
I'm gonna kahuna down here and do what I want, and let's see if anybody's willing to stop me. I think it's I'm gonna do what I want, and I know nobody's gonna stop me because nobody can stop me. Or shouldn't say can. I think people can, they just aren't willing to, and he knows that. That's why I failed to that's part of the reason why I failed to respect that type of a take.
And one of the reasons I fail to respect it to the level of Steve Dace is that he's fighting for an unjust cause. If he was being stubborn in the face of public criticism, and I believed that he was fighting for a just cause and he was doing what is right, even though it was unpopular, then absolutely, I would be fully behind him.
And as I've said before, like if this was, if you had to pull one person from the college football world that you just look at and say, he is the epitome of like no respect, like you don't respect this individual, like his morals, his ethics, who he is as a person, his reputation. Like, let me just give you the first one that comes to my mind. Bobby Petrino.
Okay.
Like Bobby Petrino is a perfect example. Like most people, I mean, I had Tavian Banks on my show, and he worked for Bobby Petrino. I can just tell you right now, Mark, what people believe about Bobby Petrino is, I think, mostly correct from what that conversation I had with Tavian. But Bobby gave Tavian an opportunity to work, so I know he feels indebted from that regard. But Bobby Petrino was here doing what Kirk's doing with his son. I would be able to handle it. I think a lot of fans would probably be able to accept it quicker. But I think a lot of people do have a natural love for Kirk Ferentz and what he's done here, an affection for the fact of who he is as a person, who he is as a man, and how long he's been here. And he's a product of the Hayden Fry system. And so I do believe, at least from my vantage point, some of my frustration with the situation isn't just that the offense has a chance at not being very good again, and that you're risking a critical segue into the post normality of the Big Ten, as in you have USC and UCLA joining, the divisions are going away. It's a critical time to make some changes that are necessary to be a potential contender in this conference moving forward. I think it's more so for me, the fact that I do have a lot of respect for Kirk Ferentz, and this doesn't fit into who he is as a person, who I've always seen him as a person. You know, a guy who's always done what's best for the program. I don't feel this is what's best for the program. And maybe Kirk believes it is. I think he's way off base if he believes it is, and I want to believe that's what he thinks, because I can't imagine him doing something deliberately that he knows is knowingly does something that is not what's best for the institution. So I think that it just doesn't fit in line with who he has been for the past 23 to 24 years. I think that's the frustration for me.
Especially since he isn't playing office politics in some, corner of the office with 3 people under him. And that would be not a good thing as well, because you're, affecting 3 people. But, this is the guy that in some respects, being the head football coach in the state, he's the most public individual in the state. He's the most well-known, I would think. And he's being paid a lot of money to make that program as good as it possibly can be, both on the field and off the field.
Yeah. So, I mean, I bring it up only, I know we went the first 45 minutes of this show without talking about Brian and Kirk, Mark, but I brought it up simply because I did enjoy that segment with you and Steve Dace, and I thought it was really well done. If anybody missed it, definitely go back and check that out on the Iowa channel. But did you get some good response from that piece nationally, Mark, from other people outside the Iowa realm?
Yeah, people enjoyed it. They understood it. There were a few people that stuck up for Kirk in the comments, but very few. And then the people that I recognized or showed themselves to be just fans of other fan bases, understand the situation and thought that we were fair, but very forthright.
I think what's just amazing, and maybe I've said this before, but I'll just say it again. I think what's amazing about the situation with Brian, or with Kirk and Barta, Mark, is that there appears to be, and we don't know what's going on behind closed doors, but there appears to be no pushback at all from Gary. Like, he's not concerned at all. That's what's amazing about it, Mark. Like, he doesn't seem at all torn, or like, now maybe that's just the persona he puts on, but typically Gary doesn't do a very good job of building Gary typically, I think, shows his colors a little bit too much to the media with how he handles situations. And so I totally believe that how he's handled the situation is how he feels. I think his beliefs are completely in line with Kirk. And then the contract that we've talked about with the 7 wins and the 25 points per game, which on average would rank like 90th in the country over the past 5 or 6 years. Like, it just is amazing. It's like he's just saying, yes, this is what we want, Kirk. Yes, thank you for doing this. I want to support you wholeheartedly. I just find it fascinating. You get what I'm saying, Mark?
I get what you're saying.
Get my drift?
I ran the numbers, and as you will know, there is no season in the last 10 seasons that they would not have reached that minimum number of wins just in the regular season. They would have never needed the bowl game to even reach that number of wins. It is quite ridiculous.
You want me to give you the numbers, Mark?
I'm sorry, what's that?
You want me to give you the numbers of where by the way, the 25 points per game, where that would rank over the past 6 seasons? Maybe you
Absolutely.
25 points per game. 2017, it would have ranked 94th in the country. 2018, 96th in the country. 2019, 96th in the country. 2020, 90th in the country. 2021, 90th in the country. 2022, 85th in the country.
That's what they're shooting for. That earns him the big bonus.
Yeah.
For anyone that wants to check out that conversation we had with Steve Dace the other day, I'm going to drop the link in the chat. And just as a side note, listen to what adjective Steve uses to describe Gary Barta.
What was you can't just, what was the adjective?
No, I am.
Come on.
People can go watch it.
Can you send it to me in the live chat? Can you, or in the private chat?
And what he said was so funny because, like, if just the way I talk, I would bring a lot of attention to saying that. I'd be like, Gary Barta. Like, Steve just, he's just, so it gets lost in all that.
He just mixes it in with everything else.
Yeah.
Yeah. I will say this. Steve Dace was very critical of Gary Barta.
How to spell the word.
And Steve Dace is not just he was not very, I mean, from that 30-minute segment overall, he was not like he was incredibly critical of that whole contract situation, Mark. So his comments on Gary Barta were from what he's known to be the case for years. So that should be, see, you sent this over to me. Yeah, I heard that too. Now that you sent it to me, I did hear that. Everybody go back and listen to it. Just interesting vocabulary choice by Steve Dace describing Gary Barta.
You've got quite a soap opera of a team here, Corey, to cover.
We do. And Steve Dace, by the way, for anybody that doesn't know Steve Dace, he does live right in the center of Iowa. He lives over in, I think, West Des Moines still, last I knew. He is right in the center of it. So he does know what he's talking about, although he might be biased as a Michigan fan, and his view might be slanted a bit. And he did acknowledge that his view is slightly affected by the fact that he's older now and he's got kids and all these things. He's brought that up several times. He's brought up that he's brought up the fact that he recently asked his daughter to run his social media. He's brought that up like 3 times on our shows. If he brings it up when I'm on again, I'm going to say, okay, Steve, we get it. Your daughter runs your social media. That does not mean Brian should be running the Iowa offense.
Yes, it's funny. But he also mentioned that even though he hasn't talked to Kirk in a long time, they have each other's contact information. They have a long history in terms of a, I guess, semi-personal, but mostly business relationship.
And I mean, believe me, I plan on being at every media availability I can this spring, Mark, and I'll be at Media Day next fall. And, not going to change my level of respect and dignity that I try to bring to those events. But I want you to be at Iowa Media Day, Mark. That's what I want. I want you to be there next August.
Well, if I had a private plane, I would do that.
Well, why not go to Big Ten Media Day?
Possibly. We may do that.
I think it's a good idea. You go to Big Ten Media Day, you can talk to all the coaches. You can talk to Kirk. You can talk to your buddy Ryan Day, and you can watch Jim Harbaugh's wheels spin as he tries to answer a basic question.
And if any of those guys, for any particular reason, would have stumbled across anything that I've done, which I doubt, not that I'm overly critical, I don't think. I think I play it fairly straight. But, Ryan Day, between Day, Kirk, and Jim Harbaugh, I guess it would be those three. I haven't been too kind of Mel Tucker recently either. So...
Well, I mean, there's some great this conference is loaded with big time coaches, Mark, and there are big name coaches in the SEC. I remember a year ago saying, "Hey, I think the Big Ten has maybe the best coaches in the country." Remember us having that conversation?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And I think you ended up doing a whole show, a live stream on ranking your coaches.
Oh, I'm in the process of doing that right now. So we've released the first third. I got to release the other 2/3. So we'll see where Kirk Ferentz ranks among my national 1 through 160. It's 1 through 69. The Power 5.
Just think about it, Mark. How many NFL guys are in this conference? How many guys who have proven themselves I shouldn't say proven themselves, but have been head coaches in the NFL? I would guess more than any other conference.
Well, obviously only one of them is a head coach.
No, there's been 3.
Oh, Matt Rule, Jim Harbaugh,
Greg Schiano.
Who am I missing? Greg Schiano, head coaches in the NFL. One successful head coach in the NFL.
Okay, well, I mean, Nick Saban wasn't a successful NFL head coach.
Okay.
I'm just saying that
wasn't unsuccessful.
He wasn't? Really? Should we go look at Nick Saban's track record?
You don't need to look it up. I'll tell you what it was.
Okay. You tell me what it was.
He went 8-8 and 7-9 in 2 seasons.
Okay. So that's not unsuccessful to you?
That's an incomplete to me. 2 seasons in the NFL.
Did he make the playoffs?
He coached 2 seasons and he didn't have a quarterback.
Okay.
So if he would have coached like 7 seasons and had that same record, I would have said, yeah, he was a marginal coach. He went a little bit under 500, but 2 seasons, I can't really judge that. I really can't.
Okay.
Make an evaluation on 2 seasons.
But they're just, I mean, in addition to the former NFL guys, you have Kirk Ferentz, who's considered to be the dean of college football. You have Ryan Day, who's probably going to be an NFL coach someday, would be my guess. I could be wrong on that. Wouldn't be surprised if you believe that's going to happen at some point. He'll take a shot in the league.
Yeah, I would believe that he is going to be an NFL head coach.
You have PJ Fleck, who I think is still a pretty big name nationally. James Franklin's a big name nationally. Mel Tucker's a big name, although he's got some work to do. He lost some reputation this past season. And then Luke Fickell. I mean, he's the hottest name in the coaching market this past offseason. So it's just a very intriguing coaching landscape. Obviously, you've got a newbie at Purdue, Brett Bielema. How about Brett Bielema? Wasn't a head coach in the NFL, but he's got plenty of NFL experience. And Yeah, I mean, he might be he might be the best coach. I mean, I shouldn't say that. He might be the best coach of the non-contenders out there. I mean, like, best proven coach of anybody not named Ohio State, Michigan, Iowa, Wisconsin, Penn State. They got an opportunity to kind of, I think, take what Purdue's had in this conference over the last 5 to 6 years under Coach Braum and kind of be the next of the four. So
there are no coaches in the conference outside of Ryan Walters with Purdue. Let's put him off to the side, obviously. That I think that I dismiss as, okay, they've shown that they can't get the job done. Tom Allen would be the closest.
Yeah, that's who I would have.
For me.
Yeah, and you got Pat Fitzgerald, the one guy I didn't bring up, he's had opportunities to be. I believe it sounds like he's had opportunities to be a head coach in the NFL. Yeah. And he's turned it down. So
he is slipping in my rankings. That's for sure.
Yeah, that's you wonder, he had opportunity. It sounded like he had an opportunity with the Bears a couple of years ago, and you wonder, or maybe it was closer to a year ago. Was it just last year?
No, I think it was a couple years ago.
You almost wonder maybe he should have left. I'm surprised he didn't. Like, if he saw that the talent level and just if he had any foresight at all, you would think he would have done that at that point, just to keep his career on the right trajectory.
Some guys want to coach in the NFL. Some guys want to coach in college. Some guys are good with either one, whatever the better opportunity is. If it were me, from what I know, and this is speaking from the outside, I would rather be an NFL head coach today than a college football coach with the transfer portal, with NIL.
I agree. And we talk about the haves and the have-nots. I'd have to think that Northwestern becomes more of a have-not than they're already a have-not. But with the addition of NIL and the transfer portal, aren't they even more of a have-not, Mark?
Yes, they are. They're going to struggle with this.
Only going to widen. Also, Mozart's Ghost, good question. What is happening with Jim Leonhard? He's not with Wisconsin, is he?
Yeah, so we've got a couple questions coming in. We've got the let's catch up with these. So we've got the one on the screen with Cole. He wants us to name our top 5 quarterbacks in the Big Ten. So quickly off the top of my head, I'm going to go so I'm going to make some projections here, similar to what I did a few years ago. And people said I was insane because I said that a quarterback who had never played a meaningful game was the second best quarterback in the country. And that was Tua Tagovailoa. So I'm going to do the same thing here. And I'm going to say J.J. McCarthy, number 1. Kyle McCord, number 2. Drew Aller, number 3. Talia Tagovailoa, 4. Cade McNamara, 5. Those are my 5.
Okay. That is not my 5. I was writing them out as you were talking. Tagovailoa, number 1. J.J. McCarthy, number 2. I got Casey Thompson, number 3. I think we'll see. That's maybe that's a dark horse pick, Mark. But I've got McCord, number 4, and I've got 5 is hard for me because I love Cade McNamara. I do. But I've got to see what he does. Like, if he comes here, and it's just hard for me to imagine that he's going to put up great numbers here. I think he's going to be a better leader. He's going to put up decent numbers. But to be top 5 in this conference, in a conference that will be better at that position, but at the same time, who else am I going to pick? Who's at Michigan State right now? Is it still Peyton Thorne?
Peyton Thorne's back. He's really good. He's a good quarterback.
Maybe you put Peyton Thorne there. That's kind of what my thought was. Maybe Mordecai ends up being a guy on the top 5. I mean, he's got an opportunity. I mean, we don't even know who's going to be the starting quarterback at Wisconsin. So that's a good question. Great question. But I think there's no question the top 2.
Oh, I think there's a big question.
Yeah,
I think the Ohio State quarterback could be the best quarterback in the conference by the end of the year.
You can't rank a kid preseason who's never played.
Did you hear what my intro was into my top 5? In 2018, I said Talia Tagovailoa is my number 1 or 2 quarterback. I think Trevor Lawrence, yeah. Then Talia was number 2. He hadn't done anything.
Talia or Tua?
Tua, I'm sorry. Tua. Yeah.
Okay.
And he backed me up. So I was making a projection. I get your point too, and I understand. I think it's reasonable. Like, I don't think you're out on a limb by saying that you can just say, well, how can you rate guys that haven't played? But if Ryan Day names a starting quarterback at Ohio State, just like Nick Saban with Bryce Young, same thing. That was the better example. Bryce Young, I said the same thing with him. I ranked him like my second best quarterback in the country. He had like 6 pass attempts in a mop-up game. And I said, if Nick Saban said that he's the starting quarterback for the entire offseason, it's good enough for me. 5-star, second best quarterback in the country. Sam, thank you so much for the contribution. Cole, we appreciate your question and contribution as well. And the other one that you started to point out was it this one here from Sam as well? View on Kurt Warner as a future offensive coordinator, head coach candidate. Kurt Warner. Well,
such a shot in the dark. I mean, how do I know what Kurt Warner? He's been coaching high school football, right?
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, sometimes the best players aren't the best coaches, Mark. Deion Sanders is an exception. Now we'll see what he does at Colorado. But Mark, you know this. Sometimes the best coaches are not the best, the best players are not the best coaches. And Kirk Ferentz is a good example of that. Wasn't a great college football player. Don Patterson wasn't a great college football player. Pretty darn good college football coach,
sure.
Right? Those are just a couple of examples, but we'll see.
Kurt Warner,
whose aspirations are.
I'm sorry. Kurt Warner kind of strikes me in the Trent Dilfer mold in that he's an exceptional communicator of the sport. When Trent Dilfer was on ESPN, I thought he was the best in the business.
He was good
explaining the game. Now, what he does as a college coach, he just got a Group of 5 job, and I can't remember where.
Didn't he quit?
Somewhere down south, like South Alabama.
I thought he quit.
And he quit right after?
I thought I read
something about that. Okay. But Trent Dilfer, just like Sean Salisbury, some off the field issues with that guy. But man, in terms of explaining the sport.
Sorry to Trent Dilfer. I apologize to Trent Dilfer. You know who I'm thinking of? I'm thinking of the former Ravens guy that what's his name?
Oh, Ed Reed. Bethune-Cookman.
Ed Reed. What happened there?
I don't know.
He got hired where?
Bethune-Cookman.
He got hired at Bethune, and within a few days, he was gone?
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Bill Belichick did that once.
Did he really?
Yeah.
Where at?
With the New York Jets. He was named the head coach of the New York Jets. Took the job. Press conference. Accepted the job. They had a press conference. He quit like 2 days later.
Little bit different, though, at that level. You can get away with it. But Ed Reed doing that at Bethune-Cookman, that might be his coaching career. He might be done. Hard to trust a guy who didn't show up. You know what I'm saying?
But he's Ed Reed. That might be it for somebody else. But he's a Pro Football Hall of Famer.
Maybe that's what his thought is. I can get away with this because of my name.
And another contribution coming in from Cole. We thank you for that. Dylan Raiola will be the best quarterback in the Big Ten in 2024.
No, it won't. I can tell you who will be. Marco Linez. Just kidding. But maybe might be. Maybe he is. Maybe Marco Linez is. Here's the deal. What happens, Mark, if Brian has a terrible year this year? With Cade, with Seth Anderson, with all the pieces they're bringing in, with the tripling down, if they have a bad, and I mean bad, I mean if they're not even top 90, because they got to be top 90. Like if we're 90 to 100 in total offense, I can't. Just listen, imagine that.
We were having these conversations last offseason.
I know, but just imagine if that happens. I guess my point is, if that happens, I would not be surprised if Kirk Ferentz walks away. I just wouldn't. He doesn't like NIL. He doesn't like the transfer portal. I thought it was very odd. Last Big Ten Media Days, go back and watch the press conferences. I only watched one day of the press conferences, but that one day, it was the first day, Kirk Ferentz was the one coach who was not asked about USC and UCLA joining the conference. And I was so upset by it because Every other coach was asked, and every other coach took the high road and said the right politically correct thing. They said it's great. It gives us more exposure, the money aspect. You can't argue with that. I don't think Kirk would have said that. I don't. And I wish that Kirk was asked about it. I don't know that he's ever been asked about it. Maybe he has, and I've just missed it. But man, I hope somebody. I don't know that I'm going to go to Big Ten Media Days this year, but man, I want Kirk to be asked about USC and UCLA. He didn't like those two schools joining the conference. No way.
It sounds like you are going to be the guy to ask him.
Where is Big Ten Media? Is it up in? I know let's see. Is it up in
It's usually in Chicago.
Okay, but
I don't know where in Chicago.
I think the basketball. See, some of them are being moved to Minneapolis. They're going to being held in Minneapolis, but I don't know if that's for football or basketball. Anyways, so I would be, but if for some reason the year is not what Iowa envisions and what, it just doesn't work out, I would not be surprised, especially if Brian is kind of forced to leave. I wouldn't be surprised if Kirk is right behind him. And Mark, then we're talking about a really fascinating time period, a dangerous time period, right? Moving into a very dangerous time in the conference. But it would be fascinating. There's no question about it. It would be fascinating. I don't know. It's going to be very, very intriguing.
You might have sealed my ticket to Big Ten Media Days by the statement that you just made about Kirk not being presented with that question.
Well, isn't that strange? Don't you find that strange?
And maybe I'll ask him.
Isn't that odd though that media people asked like every other coach, and the dean, the oldest guy, wouldn't be asked? I thought it was very strange. I remember thinking that last year, watching it on television. I thought it was very strange. So maybe I will go unless you go. Either you or I have to go and ask him that question. One of us has to
go. We'll flip a coin.
Okay.
All right. Corey Bratta from the Hawkeye of the Storm. If you're not familiar, and I believe just about everybody is, but if you're not familiar, as we hopefully are bringing in new, fresh blood to this show each and every week, all right, here at the Voice of College Football, but you got to catch Corey's work, especially with March Madness right around the corner, on from the Hawkeye of the Storm. So everything football and basketball related, Corey is all over it there. And of course, we get together here at the Voice of College Football every Tuesday at 4:30 Central.
Mark, so to mention real quickly, Thursday night, no Gary Close for the postgame. We're going to have special guest Devin Archie, former Iowa basketball player Devin Archie. That may be a name that triggers some people's memories. They may have to stop and think of who that is. He was a member. He was part of the carryover from Todd Licklider to Fran McCaffrey. So those were some tough years to be an Iowa basketball fan. But Devin's a good guy, and we're going to have him on the show for the postgame show. And also Frank Henderson, Tony Perkins' uncle, will be joining us. So, and Devin and Frank are good friends. So it'll be an interesting show without Coach Close for one night. But Iowa, Ohio State, 8 p.m. Central Time Thursday, postgame show shortly following the game. And
of course, at this point, anybody can beat Ohio State. So,
yeah, they're struggling. But Iowa got beat by them by a lot. They got trounced by them up in Columbus. So they got to win this game at home. I mean, you don't want to lose to a reeling Ohio State team. They look like a team right now that's thrown in the towel. And we'll see if that's the case on Thursday. I don't know what the future for Chris Holtmann is. They've got talent there. I don't know where this thing went wrong, but they're done. I mean, they would have to. I suppose obviously they go to the Big Ten tournament, win out, and the Big Ten tournament they're in, but they're not getting in that large bid. So it'll be interesting to see what team shows up to Iowa City Thursday. Late game in Carver.
And also keep in mind, everyone, that the Great Oreo Cookie Challenge is coming soon. All right. For Corey, I'm Mark. Appreciate you being here. Bring a few friends next week, and we'll see you on Hawkeyes Live next Tuesday.